Recently in the FNAF community, there's been a lot of discussion around the minigame Midnight Motorist. The minigame has remained pretty much unsolved since its appearance in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and I truly believe that this minigame is the key to solidifying the order of certain events on the timeline. Before we hop into the theory, I think there are 6 things that we know for sure about this minigame. Number 1. The dirt pile in the minigame is walking distance from the house and is likely a grave. We see it referred to as an unmarked grave in the Ultimate Guide. Number 2. Orange Guy is William Afton in this minigame. He drives a purple car that is similar to the one that he drives in the FNAF 2 Take Cake to the Children minigame. Number 3. William is probably drunk driving in the minigame. He stops by a place called Junior's, which is a common name for a bar, and he is aggressively speeding on the wrong side of the road, as well as showing aggressive drunken behavior towards people inside of his house. The footprints outside of the house do not indicate an animatronic kidnapping a child. The human footprints run past the animatronic footprints, showing that the child ran off into the night past the animatronic. If the implication was child kidnapping, the window would be broken and there would be animatronic footprints trailing off through the bushes, not human footprints. The animatronic footprints are also likely from an actual physical animatronic, not an apparition or hallucination. That's why there are physical footprints on the dirt. Number 6, and probably most important and most definitive of all of these points, Midnight Motorist occurs on the night of Charlie's murder. It is raining that night, William is driving his purple car, and we see tire tracks appear outside of the security puppet minigame. Okay, so what's even happening here? To preface, this theory fits neatly into my solved timeline video that's up on my channel right now, so if you want to get a better idea of my headspace, you can check that video out. The basis of this theory rests on who the person on the couch is, and who the person running away is. I personally think that the person on the couch is Michael Afton, and the person running away is William's youngest son, the crying child. And I know what your number 1 complaint is. Michael and the crying child's personalities are completely different from their personalities in the FNAF 4 minigames. And you're right, I won't dismiss that fact, but what if the events of Midnight Motorist result in the personality shift for both Mike and the crying child in FNAF 4? Let's start with Mike. In Midnight Motorist, he's very calm, serene, and a little exhausted it seems. He's mindlessly watching TV at midnight. When William walks in, he seems exasperated that he has to defend crying child from his abusive father, and it seems like this happens a lot in the household. This is a massive shift from his actions in FNAF 4, where he bullies the crying child and locks him in his room. Crying child himself is very rebellious in Midnight Motorist, breaking a window, running away from his home, locking the door to stop his father from going into his room. In FNAF 4, crying child is, well, always crying, collapsing in a heap on the ground whenever there's so much as a noise, terrified of the golden spring lock suits. I put the minigames in FNAF 4 after Midnight Motorist on my timeline, so why do Mike and crying child change so drastically? And what would be the narrative reason for this personality change? That all lies in William's actions after the minigames take place. I claim, at this point, William's wife has divorced William and committed suicide, as implied in the retro CDs of Security Breach.
It's really sad, but it's common for one parent to use their child to hurt the other parent. I know your mum, after she lost the custody case.
She is the one in the grave, in the clearing. William gets jealous of Henry's perfect family in Charlie and kills her in a drunken rage. Crying child keeps running away at night to grieve his late mother, but William tries to stop him by wearing or placing the spring Bonnie suit outside of his window to scare him from going outside. Since it's raining on the night of Midnight Motorist, William can't use the spring Bonnie suit because the spring locks would trip, so crying child is able to escape due to the suit not being there. This causes William to punish crying child for running away. Mike tries to stop William from doing so, but for defending his brat of a brother, he is also punished by William. I think that this is a great opportunity to dive into Mike's character. If this quote did indeed come from Mike, what would Scott be trying to tell us here? It's to show that Michael truly does love his brother, despite playing pranks on him all the time. I know that I was a terror to my younger sister when I was little, but that doesn't mean that I don't love her deeply. This scene was to show that Mike was protecting crying child from William's abuse, beginning with pure and protective intentions, but after crying child runs away, William builds the nightmares and puts both crying child and Michael into the observation room to be tortured by them. This then causes Michael to blame crying child for William tormenting them, as he was the one who kept running away, turning him into the bully we see in FNAF 4. This also explains explains why Crying Child is locked in his room in FNAF 4. Mike doesn't want him to run away again because he's afraid that William will punish him further. We can also go even further here and use some evidence from FNAF 6. Remember this poster in the back alley of the pizzeria? This obviously represents the Afton family. Elizabeth being the clown because she will eventually turn into Baby, Crying Child being the bear, kept on a tight leash by his father William for fear of him running away and getting hurt, and that just leaves the dummy to be Michael. We know from the Sister Location Custom Night final cutscene that Mike looks a lot like his father.
They thought I was you.
So we can confidently assume Mike to be the dummy. This poster therefore reinforces the theory that Mike is being controlled and overpowered by William to do his bidding against his will. In this case, it's to keep Crying Child in his room and prevent him from going outside. However, Michael gets sick of this overbearing control and his anger manifests in the prank that ends in the Crying Child's death. This poster is also the first time that we see Crying Child portrayed as someone mischievous and somewhat dangerous, implying that Crying Child did indeed have a rebellious streak before William put him and Michael in the room with the nightmares. We can also use this poster to say that at the time William is being extremely overprotective of Crying Child, William's wife is out of the picture, as she has no representation in this poster. This furthers the theory that she is the one in the unmarked grave in Midnight Motorist. This narrative also explains what the Crying Child saw. It can't have been Elizabeth's death, as Baby clearly states that there was one person in the room when Elizabeth died, that being Elizabeth herself. Crying Child saw William standing outside in the Golden Spring Bonnie suit, but even if an animatronic was scaring Crying Child by staring at him through the window, how can I confidently say that it's Spring Bonnie? Well, 3 reasons. 1. The animatronic must have 3 toes, and Spring Bonnie fits that description. 2. William must have easy access to the animatronic. That narrows it down to the Golden Spring locks and the Core 4. It seems to be weird for it to be any of the Core 4, so we're down to Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Spring Bonnie seems more likely since William has an obvious connection with the Spring Bonnie suit, and in FNAF 3, we see a visual parallel of Springtrap looking through the security glass at Mike. Thanks to commenter Charlie for noticing this super great connection that I think ties up this theory quite neatly. I also want to clarify something about Charlie's death that strengthens this theory. In MatPat's Ultimate FNAF timeline, he says that the Bite of 83 was what made William design the security puppet and the wristband system that we see in the FNAF 6 minigame. This system was meant to prevent kids from going outside, Matt claiming that anyone who tries to leave would be stopped by the puppet. But this isn't true. The puppet is only programmed to stop Charlie from going outside, hence why I think the puppet is Henry's creation. He wants to make sure his toddler is safe. It makes sense why he would do this. He's running the busy restaurant and needs eyes on his only child, who is presumably 3 or 4 years old, the age she died in the book trilogy. He can't parent her himself. Also note that the security system likely wasn't a response to the Bite of 83, as the Crying Child wasn't killed because he went outside. He was killed by an animatronic, so why would William build a security system that involves an additional animatronic that prevents kids from going outside? That's not solving the problem. If anything, it's creating a new one. Therefore, Charlie dies before the Crying Child, which is why we see traces of the Crying Child in Midnight Motorist. I want to add here that the channel ID's Fantasy added an interesting evidence point to this theory in their Elizabeth/sister location video that I think is super interesting. So when Charlie possesses the puppet, the purple tear marks appear on the puppet's face that weren't there previously. William likely saw these tear marks and noticed how weird it was and decided to investigate further, therefore discovering that Charlie was possessing the puppet. This then instigated his research into animatronic child possession, Remnant, and the construction of his underground bunker, which would then lead him to build the Fun Times. Okay, so there's my evidence. Let's do a quick narrative recap of this theory. After the death of his wife, William's youngest son wishes to go mourn her death at the unmarked grave behind their house. William, a controlling father, tells him to stay in his room, but he won't listen. In a last-ditch effort, William begins to put his prized Spring Bonnie suit on and stands outside of his son's room, his son terrified of the piercing gaze of the mechanical bunny. William continues to berate him during the day as well, hitting him repeatedly. His oldest son Mike would always protect his brother from his father, which caused William to get angry at Mike as well. This culminated in a night that would change the future of the family forever. William, after drinking away the pain of his wife's death for the night, goes on a drive, passing Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. A child is outside, his business partner Henry's daughter Charlie. William immediately pulls over and murders her in a drunken rage, her existence reminding William of Henry's perfect family and his own wife's death. On his drive home, he tries to get more alcohol, but the owner of the bar, Junior's, doesn't let him in because he's been drinking too much. He drives home, passing his son Mike watching TV on the couch and knocking violently on his youngest son's door. Mike lazily tries to stop him. He's witnessed this scene so many times. William finds the door locked and goes outside to investigate. His son had broken the window and ran outside to his mother's grave. William couldn't frighten his son that night with the spring Bonnie costume because it was raining. The moisture would have caused the locks to trip and killed William. This was the final time he would let Crying Child escape. He promises to punish his son for what he's done, and punish him he does. After discovering the secret of Remnant, thanks to noticing Charlie's possession of the puppet, he's created his underground research bunker, and in addition, a special observation room that he would use to torture not only his youngest son, the Crying Child, but also Mike, for always being on the Crying Child's side. After suffering at the hands of the nightmares in the testing room, Crying Child slowly becomes terrified of disobeying his father, becoming the heap of tears we see in FNAF 4. In their new house, William reverses the lock on his door so it can be locked from the outside. Mike's anger for his younger brother grew the longer he was subjected to these terrors. It was his fault that their father put them in this mess in the first place. He would constantly bully his brother in their own home, even locking him in his room for fear of him escaping again and making William even angrier. This would culminate on Crying Child's birthday, where Mike's anger gets the better of him. He would finally show that little brat what was coming to him. Crying Child dies. Mike realizes how mean he was, how bitter he had become, and how far off his original path he had strayed. After days or even months of mourning his youngest brother's death, his anger starts to shift towards William, but it's too late. After the missing children incident in 1985, William has taken off, but Michael vows to undo the sins of his father and begins his lifelong chase. And that, my friends, is the explanation and aftermath of Midnight Motorist. It ties up all of the loose ends, the footprints, the personality change, the odd absence of William's wife throughout the whole series, the connection to Charlie, it all fits into my original timeline. I think for my next video, I'm going to dive into the placement of Elizabeth's death and sister location, similar to what ID's Fantasy did, so stay tuned because this is a great time to be a FNAF theorist.